Welcome to the Utility Security Podcast, your command center for all things utility security. From power plant warriors to grid guardians and even curious citizens, this podcast is your essential briefing on keeping up to date with knowledge and insights for securing our nation's utilities. Expert intel through interviews with security chiefs, tech wizards, and policy shapers. Tune in as we explore the latest vulnerabilities, industry best practices, and inspiring stories of resilience from the frontline heroes keeping our grids secure.
I want to welcome you to the Utility Security Podcast. If you can tell us a bit more about yourself and your background as it relates to utility infrastructure security.
Hey, Curtis Rickers. I'm the Regional Security Director for the American World Travel Protection. We're primarily a travel risk management business, supporting our customers in assistance services. But within our Global Security Solutions team, we run a security consultancy practice. My background in infrastructure, I have a certification in crime prevention through environmental design level 2. Throughout my career, I've been involved heavily in physical security activities, technical infrastructure. So I'll bring the question around another way. In the security industry, you get a lot of folks that are physical security and guarding infrastructure. And I like to refer to myself as a generalist because I've got a very strong background in 4 pillars of security operations. And as an example, while I was working in Portugal for a mining interest, we did a complete revamp of the site physical infrastructure. We took out the old CCT camera systems, the IO switches, everything, and put it in an AI-driven platform with cameras, sensors, fresh access points, and completely revamped the way they did their physical security.
Wow. Okay. Pretty extensive experience. So I want to get in touch upon your certificate in crime prevention through environmental design. When you think about the different types of facilities that and infrastructure that utilities have and things they have to keep secure, what are some strategies that come to mind that you think utility security professionals should be thinking about to help them prevent crime at substations or office buildings or any other facilities?
So the first thing, this is a shortcoming in the security space, is a lot of security experts will have that attitude that they're the expert. And I come from the school of you work with all the employees, you educate the employees, awareness, and they become part of your security team. So you look at, with a lot of infrastructure, it's the same as close protection. The first step is stand back, look at your facility, and see what you can see. And a lot of organizations, they won't get their frontline people involved. And if you can get your people understanding their role within the security apparatus and infrastructure. So when you look at the United States here with the roles from the U.S. federal government on the safeguarding of critical infrastructure, everybody on the team has to be part of that. And so when you look at infrastructure, I look at it of how many lines of defense do you have? To me, you should always have a minimum of 3 lines of defense. That's a locking your door, gates, barriers, berms, whatever it takes to safeguard your facility. Because ultimately, depending on what that infrastructure is, there's either a community, some form of life safety, or a critical piece of support like gas utility right-of-ways, electrical right-of-ways, that if that's compromised, it's not just a one-off event. It's going to be a cascading failure of events.
Yeah, it's a great point. I always, when people ask about our magazine, I say utilities are the most critical of all the infrastructures. Once they go, a lot of the other ones can't even operate. One area of concern that our readers are dealing with is substation attacks, especially some of the smaller ones are now targets. Kind of talking along those same lines. There's more extremist groups out there who are focusing in on utilities and want to disrupt the system. So back to that kind of design perspective, what are some things you think utilities could be doing better when it comes to protecting the critical components?
So if we look at, substations, that's a unique one because everybody thought we got it aced. You put it in a steel box, put a fence around it, put a lock on it, you're good to go. You look at some of the forms of groups that are forming and the attacks that are happening in the U.S., on the West Coast, throughout the interior, where they've figured out how to exploit the vulnerability. Where does the conduit go into that utility box? And where's the junction that's down the road from it? So they may not necessarily attack that actual physical piece of infrastructure, but they'll attack the periphery of it, knowing full well that if they can knock out that switch box that's on a pole down the street, they knock out that transformer. And then you look at in these isolated areas that are remote, where that one junction box that they knock out by either setting fire to the cables or creating some kind of a short through the system, you're dealing with railways, gas pumping station, or liquefied natural gas pumping stations. You're dealing with hard infrastructure that supports communities. That goes down, your system goes down.
Okay.
You know, and I'll just head on. Like, you look back 2 years ago, most telephone companies had those fixed junction boxes where they ran all the wires into it. Very few organizations pay attention to that, but they're still there. And the reason why they're still there is there's critical infrastructure security alarm systems that are being routed to those things. And if you look at a lot of them, they're in disrepair. I know in Toronto, Canada, where I live, you'll see most of the doors open. Nobody pays attention to them. But you know that there's critical infrastructure being routed through it for their IO systems.
Oh, geez. That sounds like a big giant red flag to start thinking about for sure. Speaking of, you mentioned Canada a bit. It's in your experience, you have some experience with Suncor Energy in Alberta, in kind of the fire response line of the business. So what are some of the security and safety learning experiences you gained from that?
So in my background, there's a couple of years where I was a firefighter, civilian firefighter. I started at a municipality, and then we had a rural footprint. So we covered about 640 square kilometers. Within that, there were power transmission right-of-ways, there were gas lines, oil lines, there were actual operating gas extraction sites and oil wells. And then you get into critical infrastructure for your electrical grids. One of the things I learned very quickly in the fire service was how you just don't respond to fight fires. You're actually responding because an event has occurred at a facility. And we were starting in late 1990s, where we actually started when I was doing my officer level courses, focusing on if there's an event out at a station, there's probably been a criminal act. So you're going out as a firefighter to deal with the life safety aspect or the environmental impact of an event. But at the forefront of it, you know that you're responding to something where the police are probably not going to show up. You may be showing up at an event as a criminal act is occurring.
Jeez.
Okay. And then you look at from in the industrial application space, where the safeguarding of critical infrastructure, petroleum plants, where it's the old put wet stuff on the red stuff. Well, nowadays, with all of the technology that's integrated into a process facility, a firefighter that's going out to put out a fire at a refinery, you're going in under the mindset of what critical infrastructure you're going to damage beyond what the fire's damaging because you're drowning it.
Jeez. Okay. So had you come up on, did you have that experience of coming up on criminals while they were doing
probably it's not funny, but we actually came up on a scene where the system went down, it came in as a fire alarm, we rolled out, people were stealing copper wire.
Okay. Yeah.
And we were rolling in, great big fire truck, looking at guys pulling cable, and it's like, what do we do?
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. That's interesting. So that's something from a security perspective to think about, and work with fire departments if they do come up on those things to
because you're
help illustrate a plan of attack. Yeah.
So that's some of the utility companies, because you got all your utility companies will have their right away operations teams that'll be going in to look at why an alarm has gone off or why they've lost contact with a facility or a site or a switch. So you've got somebody that's their job is to go and do maintenance, and they're rolling up to do, why is this not working?
Yeah.
And they're coming up on other criminal act has occurred, or they're coming up on it in real time as it's happening. And then you get worst case scenario where you look at some of the organizations that are now out, that are somewhat radicalized, that are blowing stuff up. Are they waiting to actually injure an employee or worse as a sheer tactic back to the company to stop operating?
Yeah, excellent point. Kind of leads into my next question. The organization you're with now provides guidance for some crisis management, some consulting and stuff. So what are some key recommendations you would say utilities should start thinking about, or if they're not already thinking about when it comes to crisis management?
So from a crisis management standpoint, we're all trained in the disaster recovery cycle of an event occurs, you respond, you get a lost stop, and then you do your recovery. Firefighters as well in the hoses, cops, it's doing the paperwork, paramedics, it's cleaning the ambulance out, utility workers, it's making sure that their site is made safe, put back into operation or it's idle. And so from our standpoint is take a step back from that recovery cycle and look at how you respond to an incident, the decision makers who are involved in the response capability, and review if you actually have the right people making critical decisions. Because a lot of organizations are relying on these very rigid crisis management programs. And if there's one thing with all of the technology that we're getting inundated with today, it's if your organization is leveraging technology, do you necessarily have all the right people in play? I'll give you an example. I was operating for a major project in Mauritania a couple of years ago. And when I was deploying in, project director asked me, what tools I wanted to take. He said, I need an IT person. And he was like, no, you're going in to do an engineering project. I said, I need an IT guy. Because when we get on the ground, we need to set up the IT infrastructure. We need to make sure that what's there works properly and then bring the team in. Because in this day and age, we're so wholly dependent on these things that, it just doesn't magically appear. It has to be installed, implemented, and then programmed, and then managed.
Wow. Okay.
Understand your systems, have the right people, and review your programs to make sure that you haven't built in redundancy you don't need, or the redundancy you have is fit for purpose.
Excellent. Those are outstanding points of recommendation and advice. I really appreciate that. Last question, it's kind of more of an open-ended question from a broader security scope. Any other sort of recommendations you would tell to our audience of utility security professionals, as they're moving forward and trying to deal with the complexities that you kind of detailed there?
Probably the one touch point that I bring this up in our risk management space a lot is we've become so wholly dependent on mobile devices. We look at everything that we have that's on that device. Yeah. So if you look at it from an infrastructure standpoint for utilities, organizations, do you have a bring your own device to work? Are people using that for work applications? Are they doing monitoring off their devices, whether it's a personal or a company issued one? What kind of security safeguarding have they got on that device? Mm-hmm. And from a business continuity and resilience standpoint, is it fit for purpose? Are they creating a vulnerability that they don't see by using a device? Or can they better manage those devices so that the aspects of basically an intrusion into your own business, is it right?
Yeah, definitely.
Does that become the breach point for an attack?
Yeah, I could definitely see that being a challenge. I want to thank you for your time, for joining us today, Frank. Can you tell our readers and listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your organization?
So our organization is World Travel Protection, so worldtravelprotection.com. That's our homepage. When you go in, you'll see that very heavy travel, very heavy client-facing, but in the background, you can go to contact us, ask for Global Security Solutions. That'll come to our team. So we're based in Brisbane, Uxbridge outside of London, and Toronto. That's our three primary hubs. That gives us our 24/7 follow the sun, but it also gives us our fixed bases for our consultancy practice. We've got a global reach.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to visit our website at utilitysecurity.com for exclusive intel, resources, and a community of fellow utility security professionals. Stay safe, stay informed, and stay tuned for your next mission briefing.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company manager